Project for today is going to be this John Deere LX280. The customer brought it in saying that they got it fired up this spring and then it died right away, and they monkeyed with it a little bit, but they couldn't keep it running. It would fire up and die all the time. I did already start on this a little bit to diagnose it, and I got a float bowl ordered for it. This float bowl was really rusted, so, and it's got a bunch of like barnacles and stuff in there, but we'll get that tore apart. You can see that. So we'll get to putting that, or I'm going to pull the carburetor completely off, and we'll do a thorough cleaning on it and see if that makes the difference. I'm pretty sure that's our major issue on it. So I'll get you set up and we'll get started. So basically, to get to this point, I just removed the air cleaner assembly. There's just the 2 bolts and then the snaps and then a couple of screws here. This one's not too difficult. We'll have to remove that fuel line, which feels pretty hard. I think we'll end up replacing that while we're here. That one gets kind of buried. So we might as well put a new one on it. I'll just put it up like that for now, but I can't even squeeze it hardly with the pliers, it's so stiff. Looks like our spacer's still on the carburetor. Pull the linkages off. And we got the carburetor off. I'm going to clean up the outside of it a little bit before we tear into it. That's kind of filthy. And then we'll get that float bowl off and see what we're dealing with. So I got the outside of the carburetor cleaned up pretty good. These ones, it's just a flat spot under the solenoid here. So a regular 1/2-inch wrench doesn't really fit under there. This one is already a really thin one. Otherwise I have ground down a 1/2-inch wrench just so it would fit in here. But this one was already loose, so we can just do it by hand. So I pulled it off while it was on the machine. And this is the solenoid valve, the anti-backfire valve, whatever you want to call it. And that moves up and down, which this one does have some rust and stuff in there, so we'll clean that up. And then this is that float bowl I was telling you, with all the barnacles growing in it and stuff. I scraped it a little bit, but it is just so stuck in there that we probably wouldn't have much of a float bowl left by the time we were done. I've done that, and then you end up with like pinholes that the float bowl will actually leak when they're that rusted. So I've got a new float bowl here. There's the part number from Rotary. Just making sure this is the same one, which that looks like the same thing. So that'll work, but we've got some rust and stuff around here. I'll push this pin out for the float. This one's really in there. And we'll try going the other way. There we go. Sometimes they want to come one way or the other, so. Right, needle doesn't look too bad. You usually want to look for a ring around it where it's kind of squished in. That's how you could tell they're bad. And then there's a little bit of rust down in there, but it was mostly just the float bowl that was causing all the issues. I'm going to spray this out and then we should be able to pull that jet out of the center. So I cleaned that off. It's a little bit stained still, but I just took a wire brush around and cleaned that up, and then I rinsed out the threads in there because I don't want to be jamming rust in those threads as we pull this out. They can be stuck, so if they are too stuck, I usually try not to fight them. I grabbed a little bit bigger flathead, see if we can get that in there. That one fits pretty good. Yeah, that one, I don't think we're gonna get that out of there. But it's not the end of the world if that doesn't come out. You can run a wire up through the center. And then we'll run some carb clean through it. And we got good flow coming up through there, so that should be okay. So I've got everything pretty good and cleaned out. I blew it out with some compressed air too. That is always good to do. So I'll throw our float back in here. I'm pretty sure the float bowl and that solenoid were our biggest problems. Was starving it for fuel. This is a little bit stubborn to get in here. There, it's gotta go that way. But I just took carburetor cleaner and I sprayed it down in there, and then I kept tapping it, and then you'd see like some kind of rusty colored liquid coming out of there, and I did that until it got clean. We'll go hook this to the mower and plug it in. We'll turn the key on and off and make sure it works before I put it all the way back together. I'm going to test the needle, make sure we're sealing and releasing. So I pumped it up to about 10 psi. It's slowly dropping, but that should be fine. It holds at like 6. So that's about all we're going to do on this one. There is a low speed jet up here that you have to get this plastic cover off of it. It's like a emissions deal that it doesn't let you adjust it very far. So you have to get that off to be able to pull it all the way out. But you can clean that. But this one was just plugged at the very bottom. This was rusted up solid, so it couldn't pull it down. That's what the fuel flow is, down and then up. It'll cut the fuel flow off. So we'll go hook this to the mower, make sure it works, and then we'll put it back together the rest of the way. So some of these styles, this one's a 2-wire, so you don't need it grounded to make it work, but some of them are just a single wire, and you do have to ground it to get it to work. So we'll turn the key on. So this one's not working. Might have had it plugged in backwards, but it really shouldn't matter. It was working before, so I'm not sure. Normally if they're weak, you can push down a little bit and get them to go, but this one's not doing anything. So I'm not sure what we've got going on here. Well, there it went. Well, now it seems to be working every time. So we'll call that good and throw it back on. So after watching the video back, I realized that we needed the parking brake on for that to snap. So that was what our issue was there. It looks like our gasket stayed on the float bowl here, so I'll have to find a gasket for that. So I found a new gasket to put on there. Just thread that in. I did leave the float bowl gasket, seemed okay, so I left that. I got that tightened down. These will usually spin so you can get them to the right spot, so I was kind of trying to orient it the way I need it. That looks fine. So we should be able to get to throwing this back on. So I forgot we were going to replace this little piece of fuel line here. That was hard as a rock. So we'll measure it out like this. Should be about there. And I've just got these little, like a cigar cutter, to cut the line. You should be able to reuse these clamps. Like that. I'll just put this clamp on there for now, like that. And these can be a little bit tricky. It's a little bit easier if the spacer didn't go with it, but I didn't want to peel it off and ruin our gasket, because our gasket's still good back there too, so I didn't really want to ruin that, because the linkages do get bent a little bit doing this. The throttle linkage is the back one. And get the spring and the linkage through there. Oh, we lost that one. Try to put the throttle up. Might help. There we go. It would be easier if you actually pulled these studs out. Would probably be the way that you should do it. This is just a little bit faster, as long as you can do it without bending the linkages or anything. We'll run this fuel line down here. That'll kind of squish down when we put the air cleaner assembly back on. Then we've got to plug in the solenoid at the bottom here. This air cleaner housing is pretty filthy, so I think I'm going to go clean that up before I put it on. You want to make sure your gasket here is still intact, otherwise you'll be sucking dirty air bypassing the air filter. So I'll go blow this off, and I'm going to clean up the air filter a little bit. That wasn't really that bad. It was pretty good yet. The foam was a little bit dirty, but I'm going to clean that up too while I'm at it, and then we'll almost be ready to try firing it up. I got this cleaned up. It almost looked like that hose for the breather was not plugged into this thing, so that could have been why that carburetor is all covered. in oil if that was leaking. So I got it in there now. I'll press that on, and then there's just these two 10mm nuts that hold this to the carburetor, and then there's a couple of screws down below we've got to put on still. This one's a little bit tricky with that breather hose in the way. There we go. So I'll get these two snug down, and I'll put those screws in. You don't want to tighten it down until you get everything lined up and started. This plastic stuff gets a little bit warped, so you kind of gotta work it into place. You don't want to go crazy tightening these. They do sandwich the carburetor and everything all together, but you're just tightening onto plastic and aluminum, so you don't want to go nuts tightening them down. Oh, I don't remember. I think this was how it was with the foam on the outside, like that. And then there's a nut here. And then this cover. Some clamps. Like that. I'll clean some stuff up, and then we should be able to see if it'll fire up. Well, we're just about ready to fire it up. I am going to check the oil quick. I did a service on this a couple years ago, according to the date on the oil filter, but it looks like it was hard to use. The oil looks like new yet, and the blades were like new yet, so I don't think this got a heck of a lot of use. I'll have to check the hours that I wrote down. I'll hop up there and see if it'll fire up now. The screen might just be a little bit bent. Looks like that side was bent a little bit. I pulled it up. It might end up not rubbing now. Well, I'll get the hood back on it and we'll take it out and give it a test drive and see how it works. So I'll throw this hood back on. There's just these hinges have some flat spots in them you just slide it into, and then there's one plug-in for the lights. This one looks like it wasn't plugged in anyway. It's got mud daubers in there. So get that back on there. We should be good to go to take it for a test drive. Well, I got it out back. It ran pretty good driving out here. I'm going to mow a little bit of grass with it. I'm going to take those bags off the back of it though. I don't want to fill the bags with a bunch of grass of mine. So I'll just let it dump out behind me. Well, everything seemed to work good. I did plug up that tube. I had to unplug that, but that's one of the reasons I'm not a real big fan of these baggers. You kind of have to have the right mowing conditions to get it to work correctly. They work great for picking up leaves though, and by the looks of it, that must be what they mainly use it for. So that's probably why it doesn't have a heck of a lot of hours on it. But that's going to do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.